Black News Tonight starts now. Good evening and thank you for joining me on Black News Tonight. I'm Marc Lamont Hill. Our top story tonight, commemorating the 1921 Tulsa Massacre. It's been 100 years since the incident took place, and President Biden is hoping to reduce the racial wealth gap by helping minority-owned businesses and ending racial discrimination in housing. Biden made the announcement in Tulsa, Oklahoma, as the city commemorates one of the worst acts of racial terrorism in the United States history. In 1921, a white mob terrorized the Greenwood area of Tulsa, then known as Black Wall Street. Black businesses were destroyed and dozens were killed. Thousands lost their hard-earned property. President Biden spoke about what he's doing in response to reduce the racial wealth gap.
My administration has launched an aggressive effort to combat racial discrimination in housing. That includes everything from redlining to the cruel fact that a home owned by a black family is too often appraised at a lower value than a similar home owned by a white family. I'm going to increase the share of the dollars the federal government spends to small disadvantaged businesses, including black and brown small businesses. Right now it calls for 10%. I'm going to move that to 15% of every dollar spent.
While in Tulsa, Biden also met with the 3 known survivors of the massacre. A unique program is giving cash to descendants of black Americans who were forced to work at the Virginia Theological Seminary. It's dating back to slavery and Jim Crow. Descendants are expected to receive checks of about $2,100 this year. The money is being pulled from a $1.7 million fund, which is set to grow at the rate of the seminary's large endowment. So far, only 15, not 1,500, but 15 people have received payments. That number will grow, or at least it could, by dozens as genealogists go through records to find all of the living descendants of those people forced to work in an enslaved capacity at the seminary. President Biden formally declared June as Pride Month, and he pushed his pledge to defend the rights of the LGBT community in the United States. Biden's actions today mark a return of a president that respects the LGBTQ community. On his first day in office, Biden signed an executive order calling on federal agencies to reinforce protections for LGBTQ individuals and prohibit discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity. In education, in healthcare, in employment, in housing, and all other areas, provisions will be offered. And today, Biden said that he will not rest until full equality is finally achieved and codified into law. The Human Rights Campaign announced it's planning to sue Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Why? Well, because he signed a law prohibiting transgender student athletes from playing on teams that align with their gender identity. DeSantis signed that bill today on the first day of Pride Month. No coincidence there. The bill specifically prevents trans women and girls from participating in sports teams that don't align with their sex assigned at birth. The HRC says that DeSantis and other Florida lawmakers are depending on a false and discriminatory premise that puts the safety and well-being of trans children on the line. DeSantis also says the opposite. He says the law is doing something different.
It's not a message to anything other than saying we're going to protect fairness in women's sports. We believe that it's important to have integrity in the competition, and we think it's important that they're able to compete on a level playing field. And you've seen what's happened when you don't have that.
More than 30 states, the majority of which have Republican-led legislatures, have passed or advanced bills seeking to prevent transgender students from participating in sports. You see, this is where the problem starts. I'm going to bring my guest in a minute, but I want to just say something because I am incredibly frustrated. The GOP, the Republicans, they continue to create solutions that are in search of problems. In other words, they act as if there is a crisis, as if the world is on fire and they have to put it out. They create legislation, they sign bills that have absolutely nothing to do with what our needs are, nothing to do with real public policy crises. If you were to base the world's problems on what the Republicans are doing, you would think that there are a bunch of trans girls who sit in critical race 16-19 class, and as soon as class is over, they run to the basketball tryouts to take over the girls' basketball team, and then these trans women and girls go and file a fake ballot to vote for the Democrat into office. I mean, you would think that that's what's happening when, in fact, none of these things are real issues, and yet they make them issues. Why? That's why my guest is here. Her name is Aisha Mills. She is a host at BNC. She is brilliant and amazing and insightful. And first of all, happy Pride Month, Aisha. Good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you. You said it so eloquently, brother. This is crazy.
Let's start with President Biden before we get to the super crazy stuff. Let's start with President Biden. He made a promise today to protect the LGBT community. What do you make of it?
Well, let me just remind everybody who our president is. I was actually working front lines of marriage equality movement and LGBT rights in 2015 when the Supreme Court ruled in favor of marriage equality. At that time, funny enough, like 3 days before the actual Supreme Court ruling, we were at a party at the White House where President Obama had issued same declaration honoring LGBTQ Pride Month, had an event for various people from the community to come and celebrate LGBTQ Pride Month. It was awesome. Remember that this was during a time when, President Obama came into office not being a supporter of marriage equality, at least not, overtly. It was this president, then Vice President Joe Biden, that actually pulled Obama out of the closet, if you will, to unequivocally say that he supported LGBTQ rights. It was in an interview where he's like, yeah, we're going to have marriage equality. And so President Biden is actually quite the hero to the LGBTQ movement in a way that I think a lot of people forget, that we will never forget. So it only makes sense that he would of course issue a declaration honoring Pride Month again. And it was awesome because just days after that particular party in 2015, the Supreme Court ruled affirmatively, and then the White House was all lit up in rainbow colors, which is an amazing time too. So Biden is doing Biden in the most beautiful Biden way right now, and we appreciate him for that.
Well, from hero to anti-hero, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis today, on the first day of Pride Month, sat down with his daughter sitting next to him as a prop, I would argue, signing a bill that effectively discriminates against trans women and girls in particular. What do you think of the law?
Well, all these laws are just straight trash. All they are just discrimination, because to the point that you just made, there's no problem that's happening here. First of all, there aren't that many trans students on athletic teams, period, to even statistically be, significant, right? So the idea that there's some massive problem with all these trans people taking over sports and schools in and of itself isn't necessarily true. The only reason that they're attacking transgender people is because they are among the most vulnerable in our communities, and they are the number one target right now, I would say, for the GOP as it relates to school policy. And that's just so absurd. 1619 projects coming along for sure as a key target. But again, trans students, of which there are not a lot of, and who are discriminated against at every pass. And we're talking about young people who, in addition to dealing with whatever state they may be in their lives around their own transition, around managing their own well-being, their own social engagements and health, as every single young person is doing, and then certainly a young person who may be being discriminated against in an awful state is really dealing with some stuff. This is the thing that the GOP wants to do, is continue to try to pummel them, all to score political points. It is vile that they're attacking children in this way. And that's what everybody needs to recognize, is that this is an assault on children and young people. In order to try to get at LGBT community, they're using transgendered youth to literally try and deny equality. Yeah. It is disgusting. Policy, is trash, but what they're doing around it really is anti-Christian. It's antithetical to all the values that they espouse.
Absolutely. And just to be clear for those watching this, I don't want them to think that we're saying, oh, it is unfair, but it's just a small number of people who are doing something unfair, and so we shouldn't prioritize it on the policy end. Geneticists, pediatricians, sports experts, they all are fairly in agreement here to say that it's actually a bad faith argument. There's no evidence that there is this extraordinary competitive advantage. It's far more complicated and nuanced than that. So for those of you that say, well, fair is fair, that still doesn't hold. And when you look at the data, when you look at the science on this, there's no compelling scientific reason to ban trans girls from participating in these sports. So why don't we focus on something that really matters? Anyway, Aisha, I love talking to you. I can't wait to have you back on Black News Tonight. Thank you for hanging out with me. And everybody else, make sure you join our conversation because we want to hear from you too. Just head over.